In progress.
Hey everyone, glad to see you all here. Hopefully I'm not muted. And Jonathan, what a delight to see you joining us from New York.
Hey, good to see you.
Welcome everyone to the June Pape Commons Zoom. Fun to see everyone joining from all across Canada, the US, and places scattered. So it is really fun to introduce John Karp to you all today. Gosh, we don't go back as far as Gutenberg, but we do go back to my Random House Doubleday days. And Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us this morning or at noon your time. I wonder if you just share a little bit about yourself, your family, how you entered into this crazy world we call publishing.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to see all of you. And I've just always really liked books. And I was the editor of my high school paper, my junior high school newspaper. I was even the editor of my summer camp newspaper. I wrote an expose about leeches in the Camp Lake, and I love to read. I think that I was working as a reporter for the Miami Herald, and I read The Power Broker by Robert Moses, and guess I read the Cider House Rules by John Irving, and I just thought that writers were getting at the meaning of things better than newspaper authors were, I should say. And so I quit my job with the Miami Herald, and I answered classified ads, and wound up at Random House, where I stayed for 16 years, and then I have worked for Hachette and now Simon and Schuster. So I've worked for three of the 5 major publishers in the New York area, and I love working with writers. I love doing whatever I can to help make their books better and to make their books better known to readers.
Jonathan, you're an interesting individual in that you hold a leadership position as a publisher and CEO, but you also still edit. Can you share a little bit about why you still want to have your finger in the editing process?
Well, it's mostly because really do genuinely like working with authors. And I don't get to edit very much anymore. And I will confess that the authors who I edit don't need a lot of editing. So this year I worked with Doris Kearns Goodwin on her book An Unfinished Love Story.
Yeah.
And I worked with Bill Maher, the comedian, on a book that called "What This Comedian Said Will Shock You." And later this year, we'll publish a book by Bob Woodward, who has always been one of my heroes. And you know, as the election, as the presidential election nears, I thought that you know, the opportunity to publish a book by Bob Woodward on, you know, what's going on in the world was you know, obviously too good of an opportunity to turn down. So those are the three books that I've edited this year. Actually, the book that has given me the most satisfaction is a novel. It's by a writer named Rupert Holmes. Could you raise your hand if you know who Rupert Holmes is?
Pina
Okay.
colada.
Yes, if you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, that's Rupert Holmes. Rupert Holmes is one of the probably he might be the most talented person I've ever worked with. You know, he not only wrote the music and lyrics for the Pina Colada song, he sang it. It was a number one hit single for 4 weeks, the last 2 weeks of 1979 and the first 2 weeks of 1980. So he's actually able to say that he had the number one hit song in America for 2 decades. And he also wrote The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the Broadway musical. Actually, um, this is a great story. At least I think it is. So if you see this here, this is a profile of Rupert Holmes. It's long, okay? And there it is, the full page in the Washington Post. And this was published on Sunday, August 11th, 1985. See that? Can you see that? Sunday, August 11th, 1985?
Yeah.
So I wrote this. See, it's my byline there. You can probably see that. Jonathan Karp, Washington Post. And so I wrote this in 1985. He was at this point at the Public Theater in New York working on The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And I bought every Rupert Holmes album that had ever been written. Hold on. And so I loved Rupert Holmes. I memorized all of his lyrics. And Rupert Holmes wrote, "Work is the great aphrodisiac. It's that 9 to 5 gets him in the sack." He described life as a rat race heading for a mousetrap. He wrote this song about a one night stand. It was called Terminal. He works on Wall Street. He meets her at the bus terminal when they're commuting into work, and they have this beautiful affair. And the last line of the song is, "Could have held her body my entire life, but I had to get home to the kids and the wife." You know, so I just love this guy's work. And so when I got to Random House, so anyway, I convinced the Washington Post when I was an intern to let me write about him, and I wrote that long profile of The Mystery of Edwin Drood. It was before the show premiered, and I asked him, "How do you know how to write a Broadway musical?" And he said, "Oh, I don't have any idea. I'm completely faking the whole thing." And he was so disarming about it. But he was telling the truth. He really felt like he had no idea. He wrote the book, music, lyrics. He orchestrated it, and it won all these Tony Awards. It won Best Musical, Best Book, Best Lyrics. And so, as a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old, seeing this guy have all this success, while also admitting that he was faking it, was a truly revelatory experience. And it gave me a lot of insight into the creative process and the haphazard nature of it, and also the serendipitousness of it. Anyway, when I got to Random House in 1989, the first person I wrote to write a book on the generic Random House stationery was, of course, Rupert Holmes, because I knew him. And several years passed. He wrote back. And we signed him up to write a novel. That novel was called Where the Truth Lies. It was moderately successful. It actually was adapted into a movie that you might be aware of. It was directed by Adam Agoyan, and it starred Kevin Bacon and some other British act, Colin Firth. Starred the two of them, but it didn't really catch on. The second novel didn't catch on. The third novel actually did catch on. Murder Your Employer. And it's actually still on the bestseller list in paperback now. It sold over 100,000 copies. I waited 16 years for him to write this book. It was literally under contract for 16 years.
That's amazing.
So anyway, and it's a long digression, but anyway, I don't know what the question was anymore. But so yeah, I still edit books.
That's awesome. Jonathan, you have worked with some amazing women in the publishing industry. Kate Medina, Anne Godoff, Carolyn Reed. Plus, I've said to you before, your mom is often seen. Was appearing on Word According to Karp. How have women informed your work and shaped your publishing views?
Well, obviously, it's been profound, and I think that I don't really think that it uh, is any surprise, really, because publishing is predominantly staffed by women. It's run by women. And so all of my bosses were women except for one, really. And my mom is a big reader. And I think one of the reasons I got my first job working for Kate Medina was because I'd actually read one of the books on Kate's shelf, and my mom had given it to me. And my mom was almost an exact contemporary of Kate's, and they had a lot of the same ideas about feminism and women at work. And so, I think it just sort of happened naturally. And, the question that I mean, Don, the question that I have is not so much about how influenced I've been by women as it is, why is it that there are so few men in publishing? And why is it also that men occupy such a, it seems like they occupy an increasingly small part of the landscape of books that are read these days. And it starts actually with children's publishing, where there are actually, I mean, I hear from booksellers that there aren't enough books for boys. And so it starts early, where there aren't books that boys are eager to read. And then as they get older, they're not really buying a lot of fiction to the extent that women are. I mean, I think that our own data seems to indicate that, more than 60% of our books are sold to women. When we look at our website, most of the people who sign up for our direct email are women. And I just, when I go speak to publishing groups, the audience is almost, it's more than 80% female usually when I go. I'm looking at this call, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm mystified by it because, I've always loved to read and I'm a guy. But it does seem to me, I mean, and I was at Columbia University talking to, the publishing program there, and it was, and I asked the room of mostly women, where all the men were and why aren't there more men working in publishing? And one woman raised her hand and said, because men don't read. And I don't think that's true. I really don't. But it is kind of a mystery to me. So anyway, but the women I have worked for, they have been great bosses and great leaders, and they've been very nurturing, and they've supported me and taught me a lot.
That's so good. So good. You were at the recent Publishers Weekly sponsored book show. I guess this year was just a day. And there was quite a bit of discussion about AI. What are some of the implications you see of AI to the creative process, and any concerns that you have in what you're doing with publishing?
Well, I think AI is mostly a tool to help with marketing and analytics, and I'm skeptical that it's going to dramatically affect the way books are written. I think it'll help with research. but you're obviously going to have to be able to trust the research. And I what I really would like is I'd like the AI to just answer all the questions I get about AI. That's what I would really like.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. You can see from behind me that this year, 2024, is a big year for Simon and Schuster. They're celebrating 100 years. And Jonathan, that's a when I look at the decades, I think of, the Chaim Potok and Shiloh. There's lots of books that over the decades Simon and Schuster has become known for. As you think about them celebrating their bicentennial, what would you hope would be said about the time Jonathan Karp was at the helm?
Well, I hope that a lot of the books that are published, over the next few years actually do have enduring, value, and that they speak to readers, far into the future. And one of the things that you try to do is to find writers who have a kind of authority or perspective that does have real meaning beyond the moment we're in. And I think it's really hard to do. I also sometimes think it's hard to know, what's going to last. Uh, you know, Sometimes some of the books that are 100 years old that are still being read are read for reasons that we might not have been able to anticipate.
I don't know what happened there. Dave, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Does that help?
Yeah, just if you would mute your screen. I don't know what happened there. Jonathan, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I don't have. I answered the question. I wasn't going
There
to
we go. AI happened.
blather on.
It's all good. Yes, I didn't have this in my prepared questions for you, John, but what do you attribute the longevity of some of those books? And how do you make room for new voices as Simon and Schuster?
Well, look, I think some of the books that have sold the longest for us are, one of them that comes to mind is, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I think to this day is a pretty irresistible promise. I mean, who wouldn't want to win friends and influence people? It seems like, probably every generation, when they're heading out into the workforce, needs to do that. Then there are, The Great Gatsby. I actually, that's one of our classic books that will probably forever be in print. And the thing that I think is so interesting about The Great Gatsby, I've actually studied this. Um, it it was not a success when it was first published. It actually was kind of a disappointment. Got some nice reviews, but it went away. And actually, the editor of the book, Maxwell Perkins, had to sort of fight to keep it in print. And there was a movie adaptation of it, and they thought that would keep it alive, but it didn't really help that much. Um, and it really wasn't until sort of the legend of F. Scott Fitzgerald grew
Hmm.
um, that the book became canonical. And it was the way F. Scott Fitzgerald got uh, associated with the Jazz Age and the tempestuous marriage to Zelda,
Hmm.
became sort of a prism through which you could read Gatsby. So I think that there were a lot of cultural elements, and I think there were two or three film adaptations of it. So there was a lot going on with that book. And then finally, just on a more practical level, it's short. And it was short enough to be assigned in schools. you know, in order to teach people about what life in America was like then. And then, of course, I mean, I don't mean to diminish the quality of the work. It's obviously a great American novel. I think that it's beautifully written. It allows you to muse about the meaning of identity in America and the way people how self-invention is sort of an essential aspect of American life. So there's so much in the novel that lends itself to analysis and conversation, and the relationship it has both to the era from which it was written, but also to the life of the artist who created it. Maybe all of these factors contribute to the book's lasting appeal.
Mm. We're going to have some time, a little bit of time for Q&A coming up with John. But we have one more. I'm going to ask him one more question, and I'll read Jesse's question for you, John. On this call before you, you see a number of aspiring writers, some who have book contracts in the works, books about to release, some with a library of a catalog of books. Publishing has changed quite a bit. What words of encouragement do you have today for writers?
Well, I find myself thinking of my favorite cartoon from the New Yorker. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's of a surgeon operating on a patient, and they've opened up the patient, and the surgeon, surrounded by his staff, is pulled out from the intestines of the person being operated on, a book. And the surgeon says, "I knew he had a book in him." I do believe in the egalitarian nature of writing. I do think that everybody does. I believe that everybody has at least one good book in them, whether they have the talent, to tell the story of their life or what they've learned through their life in a way that is, relatable or profound or memorable. I mean, obviously that takes some time and some craft, but I think that anybody is capable of doing it. And so what I would say as encouragement is that if you have fastened upon that story that you feel you must tell, and you're willing to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it and think about it and listen to reactions, I believe you're capable of publishing a book that people will ultimately embrace. I also think that the way books are perceived is so subjective, and so deeply personal that it's not a kind of validation that you necessarily can feel. Most of the authors I've worked with have sort of said that they did it for themselves, and that they would have done it anyway, even if we hadn't signed it up. And I think that's a very healthy approach to it. And
It's good.
I've seen books that I thought people would embrace immediately that were not embraced. And I've also seen books that I, felt hadn't really reached their audience that years later had reached quite a nice audience. I'm always sort of surprised by, the ways in which certain books stay with people. And also, how mysterious that whole process is. So I'm generally optimistic about the way books get written and published. I think that it's a pretty positive experience. I've been doing it for 35 years, and it's been a happy life for me. And I hope it has been for the authors I've worked with.
That's so good, John. Jesse's question, and John and I have had some conversation about the whole faith element of publishing. But Jesse's question is, what room is there for faith in the general fiction market? And if there's some boundaries? And I'm looking at Alice Dark's book on your shelf there and thinking of some elements in that beautiful book too. But can you speak to that, faith in fiction?
Sure. I think that it would seem to me that there's quite a large audience for that. I'm the way the question was asked, I don't know whether I'm just inferring, but and whoever asked it, I'd be interested in having you elaborate before I say too much more. But why wouldn't there be a large audience for that? You know, there's I think people are craving any kind of hope or inspiration that they can find anywhere. So did I miss something here?
Jesse, go ahead.
I'm just curious. I love to hear that you think that there's a large audience for that and a need, and I think that's got to be right. But I guess it feels like there's the Christian fiction market and then the general market, and I just didn't know what kind of crossover opportunity there was there, if it had to be really subtle and kind of generic, or if it could get into specifics a little more about like Christian faith. I just wasn't sure if there were lines that you looked for, like, well, this is a little too much for our readers, or I don't know. Just
Well, you
curious
know, I
your
think
thoughts.
that, you know, somebody, you know, like Marilyn Robinson or Anne Lamott, you know, are writing fiction that's spiritual in nature and has broad appeal. And I'm sure there are a lot of other writers who I'm just not thinking of right now. But I guess if there's a lot of I guess if I was going to say that if there's a lot, you know, I think that if there are a lot of references to scripture, then maybe you know, people might put you in a different category that's more overtly Christian. But I also think that if you're an entertaining writer and you're telling a story and it's character driven, I think whatever is happening between the lines is happening between the lines, and probably isn't an issue for any mainstream publishing house.
Really?
In fact, I think it would be really appealing. I mean, I did one novel. It was an overtly Christian. Well, I mean, I don't know whether it was I felt it was overtly Christian. It was a novel called Dark Debts by a writer named Karen Hall, and it was definitely a spiritual thriller, and she was deeply Christian, but she was having a lot of fun. You know, there was an exorcism, there was romantic comedy, there was you know, sort of like a glamorous view of the New York literary scene in it. It was a really fun book to work on. She'd been a writer for MASH and for Moonlighting, and she really had the banter down. So in addition to the spiritual questions that were really at the heart of what was animating her, you know, there was just great storytelling, and I was not looking for a Christian thriller when I signed it up. It happened to be that, in addition to many other things.
That's so good. Jesse, you just need to add a exorcism scene to your World War II app. Rebecca, I don't know where you're calling from, if you're in New York or San Francisco, but ask Jonathan the question.
Okay, great. Hi, Jonathan. I'm actually on the left coast today. So Jonathan, I actually am a former lawyer, and my firm used to represent KKR. And, there's been so much in the headlines, obviously, about that transaction with Simon and Schuster. And I'm curious how it feels to you, the sort of, the art business vortex. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of barbarians at the gate nervousness about all of this. But I wonder how it feels on the inside to, have been through that experience, and how it informs your incentives and decision making going forward.
Well, it's been an entirely good thing. And I'll just give you a little bit of context here. So Simon and Schuster has changed ownership, I think, 7 times. And most recently, it's been owned first by Viacom, and then by CBS, and then by a company called Viacom CBS, and then finally by Paramount. And the one thing that all of those iterations have in common is that at the end of the year, Simon & Schuster had to return all of its profit to the parent company. That's not true anymore. I mean, we are an independent publishing company now, part of the KKR portfolio, but independently incorporated. And our profits return to us at the end of the year now. And we're able to invest in our business, and we've hired a bunch of editors. We're growing internationally. We're expanding our distribution. So KKR is investing us in a way, really, that none of the other media conglomerate aspects of CBS, Viacom, or Paramount did. So that's an entirely positive thing. The other thing that's entirely positive is that KKR has introduced the idea of employee ownership. And so all employees of Simon & Schuster now share in ownership of the company. And as our value increases, so do the potential rewards that employees will receive when KKR ultimately sells us. So, it's been really good so far. It's only been half a year. But so far so good. They've kept every promise they've made. They've asked us really good questions. They're letting us run the company the way we want to run it. And I hope it will be good for authors.
And you've done
Thank
some
you.
really good alliances with Holland and France too recently.
We bought the #1 publisher in the Netherlands. And we're now allied with a new company starting in France by the former CEO of Hachette Livre. Yeah, it's an exciting time and a good time, I think. The larger ecosystem in which publishing companies operate, is obviously changing, and I don't think that it's publishing has always been a niche business. It's not really a mass market business, even though there were mass market paperbacks, and even though there are books that sell, there are a few books each year that sell 1 million copies. But for the most part, you're going after a fairly, it's a lot of books, appealing to segments, to particular audiences. And what I've sort of observed in the culture is that media is becoming much more specialized in the way that publishing always has been. Publishing has always spoken to niche audiences. Now I think you're seeing movies speak to niche audiences, and TV shows, and magazines, and online publications, and podcasts. And I think that when you look at what's happening in sort of the national conversation right now, I think the biggest challenge is sort of getting everybody to pay attention to the same thing. We hardly ever do that.
That's good. That's good. Susan Fish, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Hi there, Jonathan. Thank you. And thanks, Dawn. I'm up in Canada where we are melting like you may be in New York. My question, you mentioned The Great Gatsby. and the length of it being a factor within it. And that brought to mind a question for me. I know a story needs to be as long as it needs to be, but I'm wondering about trends in length in different genres, and particularly in fiction. I'm just curious, what is being bought in terms of length, and what are the numbers changing around word count?
I will answer your question, but first I think I need to make the obligatory joke about carp talking to fish. Somebody needed to do it, and it had to be me. You know, I took a guy to a seafood restaurant, and his name was Bass. And we had a good laugh about that too. Anyway, well, I mean, it is definitely true that The Great Gatsby has been assigned in high schools because it's a short book. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. And it's also true that there are some books that we have published recently that became viral online because they were easily read. We published this memoir called "I'm Glad My Mom Died" by Jeanette McCurdy, which has been on and off the bestseller list for, like, I think we're in our third year on the bestseller list now, you know, and it sold, you know, it has sold in the millions. I think it sold 3 million copies already. And, you know, and I think the fact that you can read that book really quickly is definitely a reason it sold well. We also published Mary Trump's book about her Uncle Donald. And it, you know, it sold for a lot of reasons, but it was another short read. So I think, you know, for a certain kind of nonfiction, I think that maybe it's better if you don't, you know, tell every last detail. Maybe people are a little less patient. I mean, again, if the writing is spellbinding, I don't think it matters. It will take people longer. I mean, the Doris Kearns Goodwin book, An Unfinished Love Story, it's about 400 pages. And people are, you know, she's saying that she's never, now for her, that's short. Team of Rivals was like over 600 pages. Yeah. And she said that for the first time in a while, I think she might have even said for the first time in her career, she's actually getting feedback from people while she's still on the book tour because they can finally finish the book. You know, so but you know, so we all know that attention spans are, you know, are being tested by digital media in a way that they perhaps haven't been. But I also think it's equally true that long books are still selling. I mean, the Sarah J. Maas phenomenon, those books are long, and people seem to be reading them.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry Potter was really long. I'm still sort of amazed that, you know, all those, you know, 12-year-olds were, you know, able to get through all of that.
Yeah. We have room, space for one more question. Tara, if you could unmute, that'd be great.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today as well. I am learning so much, and I love having this inside look into publishing. I was really curious if you could help us. I'm also up in Canada in a tiny village, so I don't get a chance to come into New York that often. But I'm really curious about the structure of the bigger publishers. So for instance, Simon & Schuster, you have so many imprints. Are you all working in the same building? Are you working as a team? Do you have the chance to collaborate across imprints? Or is it something that you kind of work in silos and every once in a while come together for wonderful celebrations like 100 years? Yeah, just sort of curious about a peek behind the curtain.
Sure. We do talk to each other, and information is shared, and there are a lot of people working remotely. There are also a lot of people, you know, spread out throughout the country and the world now. But we really do communicate a lot. And the reason why we're broken up into, we have about 50 imprints. That's adult and children's. And the reason why we have as many as we do is because just really for the purpose of making sure that there are at least that the books are getting read. There's no way, I mean, we publish about 1,000 books a year, 1,000 new books a year. And there's no way that I could read all 1,000. But you know, if there are numerous publishers and publicists and editors and marketing people, and they're divided into smaller groups, you can kind of get a consensus around everything you publish that way. So that's why we do it. When a book is on submission, it is often multiply submitted, so numerous imprints may be reading it all at once. And the way we try to work it at SNS is that people can bid together when they want. And so if there are several editors bidding on the same book, one person is bidding for all of them, so they're obviously talking in that instance. And we take turns on who gets to bid. Usually, we encourage the most enthusiastic person to stay in, and to defer to the people who are more enthusiastic, because it's not a particularly good use of time for 3 people to be chasing the same book. But we, if everybody loves it, then you definitely don't want to discourage people, because you never know who the author is going to choose. And we're competing against other companies too. So we want to have the editor who the author feels the most comfortable with. And so we let the author choose who they want to work with, if there are multiple bidders. And I think that, the hardest thing probably for some editors is they'll get a submission and they'll spend their whole weekend reading it, and they'll come in on Monday and they'll want to sign it up, and they'll find out that there are 3 other people in the company who've also read it and loved it. That doesn't happen that often, but it does happen probably, maybe, I don't know, it might happen 100 times a year, something like that.
Wow.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
And thank you for bringing back Washington Square Press. Tell us a little bit about what it's going to be.
Well, that's another example of so that's an imprint that used to exist, and it's within the Atria Publishing Group, which is known for doing a lot of commercial women's fiction, but that's not all they do. And so they wanted to have another imprint that would have more of a literary pedigree, so that writers who they think might stand out for more review attention, or might have more of a backlist life, among literary readers, would have a place to go within the Atria Publishing Group. So that was the purpose of that. And we have a lot of imprints that are very selective in what they do. I mean, obviously Scribner is an example of that. We have an imprint that's 5 years old called Avid Reader Press, which is publishing a lot of really smart fiction and nonfiction. They have a novel out right now called The Ministry of Time, which is gotten really, really, great attention across the board. It's the first novel that made the bestseller list in its first week on sale, which is really, really hard to do. Probably only happens a few times each year. But the book's got everything. It's like a time travel thriller romance, which is also really a metaphor for the experience of refugees in the world. I mean, so it's just got everything. Anyway, so that's what the Washington Square Press is an example of, just, a specialized approach to publishing.
So interesting. Jonathan, we're up against our time here. I like to respect the 45 minutes. It has been an absolute delight. I have the highest respect for Jonathan and what he's doing. As you can tell, he's very accessible. I think one of the reasons folks at Simon & Schuster are so blessed is the word that comes to mind, is working for him, for someone who's not only at his leadership role, but also as an editor and loves books. I love your passion for books, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Don, and I admire all the work you do, and good luck with everybody and your writing. And it was a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
And if you see behind me, I'm going to be choosing names of 4 individuals who will get a surprise book box with one of these Simon & Schuster books that I have available that you probably can't see because of my background. But anyway, it's been fun. Thanks so much for each of you joining. Next month is Angela Guzman from Harper One, and she'll be talking about search engine optimization and how to make your book discoverable. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.